In May 1960, French artist Yves Klein struck up a collaboration with Parisian paint supplier Edouard Adam in order to develop a hue which would go on to have a legacy in literature, music, television, and academia. IKB, which is found under the hex triplet 002 FA7, is the more common name of International Klein Blue, but that is nothing compared to the International Fife Blues, which have been the undercurrent in the run-up to this derby. While the Pars have watched 5 of their players go off on international duty, Rovers fans have had to fret over the fitness of Richard Chin, who has travelled all the way to Laos, only to miss out on both of Malaysia's games there. This, of course, is the Oh No 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 podcast. We're done with tonight's section of Should Home Base or Should Home Depot. So we can get on to talk about some football with the derby coming up this Friday evening. I'm your host, Robbie Weir, and I've got joining me for this episode, I've got Scott Fleming. How are you getting on, Scott?
Yeah, doing not too bad. All things considered after last weekend, but thankfully a few days later, and hopefully somehow talk about some positives going into this derby game, because it's going to be difficult. But we'll find something, I'm sure.
Well, Lewis Gibson did well in his game for Montrose last weekend, so we'll take that. We've got Allan Douglas-Bunn. How are you getting on, Allan?
I'm doing good, mate. Yeah, I've got over the doom and gloom of last weekend with a little bit of help of listening to you guys on Monday morning talking about it, and I'm back to my happy clapping best for ahead of the game. Well, not really, but you know what? I'm probably one of the more optimistic among our support, and I always feel confident going into games. So yeah, I'm genuinely looking forward to it. I feel like a Friday night trip to East End Park.
Well,
normally.
I mean, certainly last time that we did it, it wasn't too great. But no. We've got Greig Brown returning as well. How are you getting on, Greig?
Grand, thanks. Yeah, just I recovered after my group therapy session on the weekend there. And similar to Allan, genuinely looking forward to Friday night now.
Yeah, well, we'll start off with a bit of a chat about Dunfermline and then, of course, come back to the Rovers' perspective that we know. Just to start with yourself, Greig, what have you made of Dunfermline's start to the season so far?
Bit disappointing, to be quite honest. I mean, they started strongly enough, but I do think that 5-0 at Arbroath a couple of weeks ago covers a multitude of sins, and I think I'm not convinced that within the camp that they're overly thrilled with the start either. That being said, I think a lot was made over the summer of the investment from board, and just maybe I think how much maybe cash they had available to them was overstated perhaps in the media locally and nationally. But no, listen, they've had a fair degree of turnover. There's a reliance on maybe younger players at the minute. They've probably got a bloated squad, but results-wise, they maybe would have hoped to be certainly comfortably in and around the playoff places at the minute, I think.
Yeah, it's with the way that Dunfermline have started, I know a lot of the talk had been about the enthusiasm from their fan base beforehand, because, of course, previously, before the last couple of seasons, they've started under James McPake. They came back up, and I'm sure at that point they were reasonably optimistic, but then it sort of became more of the same, and I don't know if their fans are maybe feeling that there's a danger that that's going to be the case. I think that the next couple of games are probably going to dictate how they're feeling about it. Scott, since the last time I played Dunfermline, they've brought in a new goalkeeper, Billy Terrell, and Nuruddin Abdullahi, who I believe has got at least some experience with Ghana on the international stage. Quite hard to assess them given the lack of knowledge. You know what it's like with Scottish Championship teams. We generally tend to stick to our own, but then Dunfermline make these wild card signings.
Aye, they are this year. They've been quite a strange sort of squad of players. Like this is the first year I would say I've gone into a season where I genuinely don't know half the Dunfermline team. And normally you would know the majority of them. There might be a few youngsters that are maybe coming through that you don't know about, or a few guys that they've signed that have came up for down south or for Ireland or whatever. But as you say, I've got no comment on the two boys you've just mentioned because I've never seen them play football. So they could be great, but they could easily just be shit. So I genuinely I have no comment on them two. But I mean, when it comes to sort of the ones that they have signed, like obviously Zach Rudden's not going to be playing; he's injured and supposedly seen a specialist for his injury. So it sounds like he's going to be out for a while still. And you've got guys, the boy that they kind of made sort of a lot of noise in the summer was the boy from Mozambique? Is it Amadi? He seemed to be the one that they were quite sort of bullish about, that was going to be like a really good signing. I've not seen too much of him, but I know that he has been playing pretty regular now. I think he took a few games to get going and he was on the bench and stuff like that, but he seems to be sort of a first team regular now. So it'll be interesting to see how he's sort of playing in the middle of the park. I don't know, is Cáceres back for suspension?
No, not yet, because it was violent conduct it would have been, so he would have missed out for a couple of games.
Because I wondered, because obviously Mullen missed 2 games, so I thought, well, for a straight red, he must be 2 as well. So, so if that's the case, then they're going to be missing him as well. So, yeah, as I say, it's the first season for a long time that I'm going into like playing Dunfermline. I suppose later in the season, once you've played them a few times, you'll get used to them. But just now, anyway, they've got quite a lot of new boys that I've just not really heard of, and you're kind of going, well, we'll see on the night how good they are. It's Friday is a sort of it's always a big game for us as like Rovers and Dunfermline fans, because it's the Fife derby. But at the end of the day, these two teams are one of them. If one of them wins, the other team's going to be under massive pressure. Even if it's Dunfermline, yes, we're still going to be above them. But at the end of the day, we've just seen after a defeat, or 2 defeats in a row, and the sort of online arguments going on about the manager's position, and you're just like, well, if that's what it's like after 1 or 2 defeats, then can you imagine what a sort of Fife derby defeat would do? But hopefully we can say that last Saturday was a bit of a wake-up call and we can sort of turn it around.
Yeah, it's last Saturday for us was a tough one, no doubt about it. Yet we're still above Dunfermline. We did have a few results within the first quarter that stood out. Similar trajectories, Allan, in terms of the teams, maybe sort of parallels, make some interesting reading there. Similar goals scored. I think we've got exactly the same on that front. And we've conceded more. They've played 1 less than us, yet we're still above them in the league. What are your thoughts going into this one?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of Dunfermline, yeah, I mean, you're right to say there. I mean, if the worst happens and they beat us on Friday, they're only 2 points behind with a game in hand. So suddenly you start thinking, well, it's a bit nervy. In terms of how they've done, I'm going to be honest and say they've done about what I expected. I wasn't getting on the bandwagon with them at all this season. I didn't, a lot of people, I saw people genuinely tipping them for the title. And it was all genuinely based on vibes and trust me, bro. Like, there was no, like, folk were just thinking, oh, well, it's Neil Lennon and, they've got loads of money. Like, well, Neil Lennon's record is mixed at best. And what money? Like, there's no real evidence of them going out and spending all this money that to be fair, nobody out of Dunfermline's been saying that we're going out. It's just the usual, noise on the internet that's the same for everything, really. So they've done about what I expected. They retained quite a number of players last season who looked, well, pish, quite frankly. Oakley Booth being the main example. There's just there was nothing in their squad that made me think, oh, they're a worry. Guys like Chris Kane, if you can keep Chris Kane fit, he's a very, very good player at this level. But if Chris Kane was able to stay fit, he wouldn't have been coming down to Dunfermline. He'd have been still playing up in the top league. So yeah, they're a funny bunch. They're probably just, I know Pie and Bovrill's not the greatest barometer for fan moods, but you get a bit of an idea. They're probably the only fan base I can see that are more negative than ours. They're not impressed at all with how things are going. are interestingly getting very excited about that Abdullahi after one game, which was a 0-0 draw at home to Queen's Park. I'm not sure, or it was away to Queen's Park, I think, wasn't it? Actually, yeah. But yeah, they're getting very excited about him on that. Oh, I hope they're setting themselves up for a fall like they have done with a few others that they've signed. But they're also, it's going to be interesting to see what kind of team they put out, because I think a couple of their players are going to have spent all day today travelling. I think Abdullahi possibly, or was it a baddie? One of them has been in like Mozambique playing or something like that, and then Chilikoa Mullen was getting himself sent off in Azerbaijan, so he's got a fair bit of travelling to do today as well.
Friday's game. Go on, Allan.
Lennon sent him a text at half time. Rest up, son.
Well, it was really coming into my next point I was going to raise for yourself, Greig. I think with what you said, Allan, Amadi's, I think he was coming from Kenya, so it was going to be a bit more direct for him to get back to Scotland. But then on top of that, you've got John Todd, Chilikoa Mullen, Shea Kearney and Mason Munn, both with Northern Ireland. Do you think that'll maybe be a factor, sort of these players coming back? Because it's not just the travel in a sense, you've got the sort of training aspect as well.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's exactly the point. The travelling, I mean, okay, you're sitting on a plane for X amount of hours and you're maybe missing your typical routine. I'm not really convinced that's going to be much of a hindrance, maybe coming back to Azerbaijan right enough. But I think you're right, it's the disruption out the weekly training. It's the kind of detachment from the squad and the sort of analytical input, the sort of day-to-day nuances of working around, even working on shape and stuff like that. Lennon was at the game on Saturday past, sitting in the main stand, and kind of he'll have had his own views on what he saw and what he was going to take from that. But then these players are kind of then removed from that, so his time to kind of work with these guys who are in and around the first team, particularly Chilikoa Mullen, John Todd, etc. These are guys that he's going to depend on. And then you throw into the mix that actually, if they're picking up wee niggles, wee tweaks, the general fatigue of being away, maybe will have an impact. But then equally, as much as the Rovers haven't had the same number of players away, you could argue that we've also not necessarily got our own position where we're getting a full strength team out on the park for different reasons. So maybe it just cancels one another out, I suppose.
Yeah, with the weightings of the squad and the numbers that they've got. I mean, naturally, Scott, you mentioned it, I think, before, but you were saying there's a few bodies missing. You asked about Caceres. On top of Rudden, they've also got Kyle Benedictus and Josh Cooper, both out. Just what are your thoughts about that? Just the sort of... Rudden had arrived, he seemed to sort of coincide of being able to lift up Andy Todd Jr. In terms of playing. But yeah, just do you think that again could be a factor, missing such key players?
Definitely. I think one of the main things I said probably the first time we played them this season was that Dunfermline have gone with a lot of young players. It seems to be the route that they've decided to go down and try and potentially get a couple of seasons out of them, and if they're on long-term contracts, maybe get an SPL club buying them, or a club down south in League One or the Championship buying them as well. But along with that comes the fact that they've not got a lot of experience in that changing room, and you've just named basically all their experience is not going to be playing, with Benedictus, Rudden, and then who's going to be their next experienced boy? Uenotu? Like, Robbie Fraser, it's all guys that are still like early 20s, mid-20s. Like, it's no... You're not asking guys here that are 30-year-old, been around the Championship for years or in Scottish football for years. All these guys have all came for youth football, or they've came for even lower leagues than the Championship. So it will be interesting to see... Like, at the same time, young players can go into games and just have no fear. Like, that. That's the other way it could go, and go, right, Lennon fires them up and says, look, just go after them. And you never know, but at the same time, I do think you need a balance of experience and youth to get through not only just games, but also a season. So it will be interesting to see what lineup they go with. What is it? An hour before kickoff tomorrow on Friday to see what they've decided to go with, because I think they probably will go with like a back three just to make sure that they're probably a bit more solid defensively compared to they have tinkered with a back four and a back three when Benedictus has been fit, but I think they'll probably want that extra cover if they've got Chillicole and Mullen back. The Ghanaian boy you mentioned earlier, all these guys are all young guys and they've probably not played a lot of football together. So he's probably going to want to make sure that we haven't got like a glaring obvious sort of point of attack on them. Because one thing I know is Barry Robson, if he thinks that there's one thing that he can grasp, he'll go after it. It's the one thing that he does. If he sees a weakness, he just goes for it. And it seems to be that. And to be fair, it worked against Dunfermline last time, putting a high press on them because we saw how quickly we scored in that last game. So it could be a case of go after them again really early for 10 minutes, see how they cope. Because you know that like Chillicole Mullen wants to be on the ball, running with the ball, driving forward, making passes, getting involved. But I mean, you were touching on like what their availability's been. Chillicole Mullen won't have even trained today. He'll have been flying back for Azerbaijan, so he's going to have one training session before the game in the space of the last 2 weeks almost. So, yeah, it will be interesting, as I say, an hour before kickoff, what sort of lineup. But I do think that Benedictus especially is going to be a massive miss in their back line in terms of experience.
Yeah, I was having a look there. You mentioned Uenotu. He seems to be a strange one because there have been a lot of talk for clubs like Crawley down south in England coming in with bids for him over the last couple of years. But now he's kind of dropped out of the team. He came back in for a little spell, but he's been in and out that Dunfermline team. And he's been the real standout over the last few years for them. So want to keep an eye on, I think, over the next few sort of months to see how that develops. Certainly across the pitch, they seem to have inconsistencies in terms of who they do play and who's going to be available and when. You look at Chris Kane, he's probably the perfect example for that. We've seen him do damage in derby games before, so whether he's going to be fit and ready for Friday night, again, completely separate question. Just to come back to yourself, Allan, do you think this, Scott mentioned it earlier on, I think, but with it, do you think this falls into the category of a bit of a pressure cooker, more maybe even than normal derbies, given the sort of starts to the league that both teams have made?
Yeah, I mean, there's no doubt that both teams are under a bit of pressure, certainly from their own fan bases. I don't know that either will be coming under any pressure from the boardroom. I think it's far too early for that. I mean, you would say our guys are proven not to be rash in the past. I suspect Ian Murray might disagree with that statement. But certainly Dunfermline they stuck with McPake for longer, albeit it's a different board now, of course. So I don't think either manager is going to be under pressure in terms of their job at the moment. But certainly they're going to come under a lot of fan pressure. Both fan bases are going to be very quick to turn tomorrow night, I think, if things go against them. I really hope it's coming from the Norrie McCarthy stand and the section northwest or whatever the hell they call themselves. I hope it's them that are booing and swearing and shouting at halftime and not our guys.
It's always a lot more fun when you're watching your rivals lose the run of themselves and go mental during a derby game. I particularly remember, I'm trying to remember if it was must have been the Scottish Cup game where we beat them 3-0 and there was a fan in that the stand that's the longer stand that's running parallel to the pitch, the one that's the main stand effectively. And not a happy chappy, as we were all too happy to make him aware. And
that's kind of what I'm putting my hopes in it being like that, because we all went. Well, most of us went to that game looking at who our back line was going to be, and I think we had a lot of players out. And was it not something like
we had one defender that night?
Was it not Dan O'Reilly, Scott Brown, and Liam?
It was just Dylan Court, and the rest were all midfielders.
Right enough, because Dan O'Reilly came in later. But it was like Liam, Dick was out. There was loads of players. It was. You went and you saw the team and you're thinking, oh crap! And we were already a wee bit down anyway. And then we just battered them. And then Big Kev saves a penalty and Leathers into Matty Toy. It was just a glorious night. So I'm pinning all my hopes on Friday night being similar.
Yeah, it was a spectacularly fun Scottish Cup game, and
it really was
just one of the better ones that we've had over the last few years, to say the least. Greg, do you think Neil Lennon, is he the type, do you think, that's going to have taken quite a lot from the first derby? He didn't really use many of the technical players in the middle of the park. Instead, he was sort of favouring your Tashan Oakley-Booths, Gilmore and Otto in the centre of midfield, which seems almost... They've made a lot of big names in the summer coming in, and I think our fans were maybe expecting in that game to have those players. Do you think this is second time he'll be looking for something a bit different?
No, not necessarily. I think Friday night, I think we could be in for an all-timer in terms of a dire serving of football across both teams. I agree with Allan completely. Like, neither manager, I think, is feeling pressure in the holistic sense, and nor should they. It's certainly not from boardroom level. But there is an element of, I think both managers will be trying to avoid losing, maybe more so than actually getting a win. I mean, you look at like Dunfermline, the run of form of late is pretty poor. I mean, take away the 5 goals against Arbroath, they're not scoring that many, neither are we. They're also not necessarily conceding that many in the grand scheme of things. Equally, neither are we. The clean sheets are about the same. So I think Lennon will go for a team that's hard to beat. So Scott mentioned 3 at the back. I think it will be a practical lineup from Dunfermline. I think he'll make the most of what he's got available to him. Listen, we're not going to be watching 1970s Brazil here on either side of the park. And I think a big part of that is that it's an odd one, because I genuinely don't think it's a pressure. I think both Lennon and Robson are pragmatic enough, but also thick-skulled enough that they're not going to let pressure from the terraces bother them, that they've been in the game long enough. But that being said, it'll be in the back of their mind that a defeat could be pretty calamitous for what it leads to in the near future. So I think a practical lineup from Lennon will be met with a practical lineup from Robson, and it's just going to be a really turgid affair. Screams 0-0, but as cliched as I suppose with derbies, you just never know.
Yeah, I mean, it's something to consider that both managers have played at a very, very high level of football, where they've probably known pressure that's been a lot more intense than they have in terms of a local Fife sphere. So how that transfers from the crowd to the rest of the players and those on the pitch, again, that's a different question. So we'll turn ourselves...
Worth noting, actually, Dunfermline are away to go... after the Dunfermline players, they're away to Airdrie, then they've got a stinking run of games. They go away to Ross County, away to Ayr, home to St Johnstone, away to Partick. I mean, as you know, if they don't get in and out of us in Airdrie, they've got a really tough run of games, and they could find themselves in a bit of bother at that point.
For Spotify listeners, Scott was practically grinning like a Cheshire cat when he heard that run of games coming up, just like a good, they deserve it. So yeah, we will see how that goes. But of course, the focus is naturally on Rovers and how we're going to handle this. Scott, Allan, you both weren't on the post-match therapy session, as Greg put it, as we were coming on. Scott, we'll start with yourself. How do you digest the result and the performance of last week without going overly dwelling on it, shall we say?
It was very difficult to accept on Saturday just how poor it was. Like, it was just like totally abject, anonymous. Like, I just couldn't believe how poor it was, especially for a home performance as well. Like, one thing that I have said, that under Barry Robson, barring, what was it, the 4-0 or 4-0 was it we lost at home to Queen's Park last year, the game that shouldn't have been 4-0 but ended up being 4. Other than that, like, there's not been too many home performances under Barry Robson that I've been worried about. Like, we were pretty solid at home last season under Barry Robson, and to be fair, I don't think we've ever really been that bad at home for a long time, to be fair. But just how just poor every player was, barring probably Jordan Doherty, who yet again was, even on a bad day, like still 6, 7 out of 10. Like you're still getting a decent enough performance out of him. And he was asked to play in 3 or 4 different positions at different times of the game as well. So no, and I would agree with the guys on that were on Sunday as well, and we've all kind of agreed in our podcast group chat as well that I thought it was up there with the worst performance under Barry Robson, probably since his first game in charge against Ayr down there. But like, to be fair to Robson, that was 3 days after he'd taken the job, and he'd had about 1 training session with the team. So that's a completely different sort of period of time for him. But yeah, it was pretty damning. But at the same time, I'm kind of hoping it's a bit of a wake up call for this squad, because whilst we know we've got a pretty decent championship squad, we've got some big names, we've got some good players, talented players, but at the same time, maybe they needed a sort of result like that to kind of shake the whole dressing room up. And then also Barry Robson maybe needed to see them sort of as poor as that, just to kind of wake them up again. So yeah, the proof will be in the pudding on Friday, how they react, I suppose.
And Allan, just you were at the game, naturally in the Tannoy box, keeping tabs. What did you make on the performance, the game, and just where things are headed going forward into this week?
Yeah, funny enough, the one thing you didn't necessarily mention there was the result, and I don't mean this the way that's going to sound. The result isn't as important, I don't think. It's the championship. Ayr are quite capable of coming to Starks Park and winning a game. And 2-0 is not a pumping. And on the paper, 2-0 is not a pumping. It's a perfectly normal championship result. It's not overly common for us to lose at home. But, that there's nothing about the result on paper that jumps out and thinks, well, that's really poor. What really concerned me was the performance. And it was just... Yeah. It was how weak-willed we were. Like, I genuinely thought for the first 10 minutes, I thought until before they scored, we were actually doing all right. We had more possession without really creating any chances, but we looked fairly comfortable. And then there was just that really horribly familiar strolling through the midfield. We saw it so many times last season. We saw it so many times in the second half of Ian Murray's kind of last season when we were challenging United. It was just such a familiar sight to see someone just stroll through our midfield unchallenged and put us under pressure. And we conceded that goal and just never really looked like getting back into it. Kind of players like Dylan Easton, I thought had actually done really well. First 10 minutes, he looked like he was really up for it. And he kind of went flat. Brown and Matthews probably each had, I would say it'd be in their top 5, certainly poorest games ever in a Rovers shirt. They were just ineffective. And it's concerning about is Barry Robson just being really stubborn and sticking with what he wants when he's not actually got the right tools at his disposal to play the way he wants to play? I don't know. I'm sure David Martindale would happily tell me that I'm just some numpty on a podcast that doesn't know what the hell I'm talking about, and I shouldn't
Allan,
be.
I'll happily tell you you're a numpty on a podcast, because I'm one as well. We all are.
Hands held up, definitely. But yeah, it was genuinely just the way we almost just like lay on our backs and got our bellies tickled. Like, we didn't really trouble Ayr at all. Even second half they didn't score. They didn't really come at us because they didn't need to. But we just didn't trouble them at all. Yeah. There was no. It's weird to say, 'cause I don't actually think the whole back three, I don't think, were particularly bad. Like, they weren't getting caught up. They were just not getting any support from anywhere. And And I mean, one of the goals was a penalty, so they're not necessarily. There's obviously, if you're having to concede penalties, then something's gone wrong somewhere. But yeah, our midfield and attack were just non-existent for most of that game, and that's what's kind of concerning. You could see us going out and getting 0-0s, but where are the goals coming from? That's kind of that's where I've sat there earlier and talked about how I'm one of the positive ones. I think, despite what I've just said, I probably am still one of the more positive ones, and that's maybe the more worrying thing. Well, if I'm one of the positive ones, how bad is everyone else feeling?
What I think for going forward, Greg, to come to yourself, Barry Robson. We're going back to our favourite topic of his post-match interviews, but this one, it was actually it was one that he raises a valid point in that immediately after the last derby against Dunfermline, he took the attitude of, right, that's done, we move on to the next game. How important do you think it is for both the manager, the players, and even the fan base to sort of reset and try? And I know it's maybe a bit more difficult given the passions involved for supporters. You've got that emotional connection to the club, but certainly for the manager and players just to have a cold reset and just basically to go into this game completely sort of, it's in the past, it's happened, we need to move forward.
Yeah, I think. To be honest, I think that the derby's the perfect game to be going into. It really is the cliche, but the form book goes out the window when it's the derby anyway. So, last week, and I totally agree with Allan saying that it was the performance more than the result. Somebody glancing at that and seeing 2-0, and what? There's not an eyebrow getting raised over that. But equally, going into this game, it really does scrub it, and I think it has to for the majority of fans. That level-headed fans, I don't think are going to still be too hung up on Saturday come Friday night, either in the stadium, watching on the telly, whatever. I think from that perspective, it's the perfect game. Even if it wasn't Dunfermline, though, Robson's absolutely going to have the players well drilled in the point of view of, well, you can't change it. It's gone, in the same way that had we cuffed Ayr 5-0, that doesn't guarantee a win the following week. So actually, there's an aspect there of these are professional football players, and you didn't get too high after a win. You certainly didn't get too low after a defeat. It's easy for fans. It doesn't matter to us. Okay, the atmosphere can obviously have an impact in its own right, but we can't directly affect the game. We can't affect the performance. So it's our right, it's our prerogative to get hung up on it, to get emotional about it, to overreact. But then you kind of catch yourself. But no, I think the players would have been, professionally, they'd have been devastated at the performance they'd put in, but there's not one player on the part, there's certainly nobody in the dugout that's actively out to underperform, to do poorly, to not represent the Rovers as well as they can. To put not too fine a point on it, for selfish reasons, they want to do as well as they can for better contracts, new contracts, whatever it happens to be. So going into Monday for training or whenever it would have been, really, I think it's forgotten about, and it's, well, Friday's the next game. And actually, we stick to what we believe in. And okay, there's the separate conversations about what that is, but everything's fully focused on the Friday. And it is totally cliched, but no, I really do think Dunfermline is the perfect result, perfect fixture to be coming up.
Yeah, you make a really valid point there in the sense that you look at someone, Scott Brown, obviously. I know that you mentioned there that Scott Brown didn't have one of his best moments in a Raith Rovers jersey, to say the least. But you can't tell anyone that Scott Brown doesn't have an emotional attachment with the club, because you look at what he's been through since he's came in, and we've had start off first season, you have the Motherwell game, you get to the Challenge Cup final, which unfortunately we lose. Then really in the second game, it comes to a head with that goal at Starks Park against Dundee United. Stuff like that's going to bond a player to a club. And I know I mentioned in the post-match that he's got that credit in the bank where you can have games like that. You can sort of, as a fan, you can sort of say, okay, it's poor performance, but we know what you can do. We know where your ceiling is or what to expect from you. So if we can try and get back more towards in that direction.
And you know what? And it's worth saying, like, I'm sitting here talking about them, having poor games. I don't think anyone's going out there trying to have a poor game and isn't putting the effort in. They're going out there and they're doing their best in the system they're being told to play. And it's not, I don't know enough about tactics and systems to sit there and say Barry Robson's getting it wrong. I don't know enough. but something's not working.
Scott, just to come back to you, again, it was my next on my notes, but Greg's kind of summarised it quite nicely there. Is it straightforward enough, just in that case, that a win erases last week and people go back to being a bit more relaxed about the situation, or do you think it's a situation where there's that potential hangover as well?
I think it just comes down to what sort of football fan you are, to be honest. How long do you take to get over a defeat? I remember having this chat with my dad. Actually, it was at the start of the season at some point, and it was just how like easy it was, because like back in the day, I remember seeing my dad getting like angry at games and stuff like that, but no like over the top or anything. But then just remember him saying, "Oh, I'm over the result by the time that I'm in my car on the way here." I'm like, really? Like, because, and then I then had to throw the sort of, what about a defeat to Dunfermline? I went, okay, by 6 p.m. then. I was just like, fair enough. But I suppose as he's gotten older, he's like, oh, it's happened. I can't affect anything. So, but no, I do think that a win in the derby is going to mask over loads. Like, it will do. Like, because the same fans that were all over Twitter, Facebook, whatever, Pie and Bovril putting out saying that they want the manager out, or they want changes to the team, or they want this, they want that. I can guarantee you, if we go in there, even if it's a stinking game and we win 1-0 in the 90th minute, they're not going to get 2 tosses at that. They're just going to care that we've got 3 points, we beat Dunfermline, and they'll be straight onto Twitter to rile up the Dunfermline fans. That's what will happen if we manage to get the result. But we're going to have to be a hell of a lot better than we were on Saturday if we're to get anything. And even, I do think that, I agree with Greg that the form book does go out the window in a derby, but you do have to, you have to turn up, because the last thing that you want is in the first 10 minutes that they get momentum on top of you, and then the fans are up. Our fans start getting on our players' back because we've no shown up for the first 10 minutes and stuff like that. So, and I mean, if there was an early goal either side, the other whatever fan base goes down early, it's going to be toxic. Just the way that the two teams have came into this game. So I do think it's going to be I know that Carol goes on about it all the time in the group chat. First 15 minutes is key, like every game, and like it's kind of just stating the fact it is. Like you're trying to set a tone, but especially in a derby game, if you can get an early goal or set the tone and get the momentum with you, it's massive. So I hope we get an early goal, because the thing is with the recent form, and it's kind of gone back to kind of the first season under Murray. See, any time we went behind in a game, you were going, can't see us getting back into this. Like, that's how it's felt the last few games, is like, if we go a goal down, where are we getting a goal for to come back into the game? Whereas we scored first against Arbroath, we go and win 3-0. Like, it's that sort of effect. I don't know if it's just confidence with the players or what it is, but I just hope that the players do just forget that result in performance happened and just focus on what they can do, which is go and put a big performance in on Friday instead.
Yeah, you're mentioning the emphasis on a positive start, and I know, as you say, Carol does mention it. Probably no better example of that than the first game at East End Park last season. Rovers just never got out the traps at all, and Dunfermline were straight down our throats. Chris Kane in particular gets Ewan Murray, gets ahead of Ewan Murray and basically gets hauled down, and from there it was always going to be an uphill battle, and it was very, very rare that we actually, I mean, we were quite powder puff going forward at the best of times in the first half of last season, so to do it with 10 men at East End Park and actually Dunfermline run out with the win, but that would make a very intriguing hypothetical situation if Rovers were to go out and perform well and to put a couple of goals past Dunfermline. I would want to see what the online reaction would be like. I'm not saying anyone's right or wrong based on the reactions for last week, but I just think that the dynamic shift would be very, very interesting to see and keep an eye on. So let's talk about the team itself. Just Allan, to come to you. at the back, what changes would you want to see? Not what you think will happen. What changes would you like to see, if any at all?
Yeah, so I've actually remembered to get a bit of paper and write down a predicted lineup, and it's probably more what I'd like to see rather than what I'd expect to see, and I've gone to a back four with Doherty going out to right back, Fordyce Hanlon in the middle, and Stevenson coming back in at left back. I think it's a game for him to break some glasses and kick some ass.
Yeah, Stevenson's certainly left an indelible impact on that last derby, shall we say. Getting its goal, massive. And we mentioned it sort of before, Greg, in the post-match podcast, but it just seems a strange move that he's not getting used more often, and I would hope that it's something that we can be able to utilise him and be able to bring him back in. We all know his strengths and what he brings to the table, so keen to see how that proceeds. Scott, just to come to you, we all know we're big Josh Mullen fans here on this podcast, to say the least. Jero has basically made the right back spot his in the last couple of weeks. Would you be making any changes there or across the back line as well, following in sort of what Allan's spoken about already?
Aye, well, I think any of the sort of supporters that have been tuning into us for more than a few months anyway will know the sort of formation that myself and Duncan enjoy seeing, and we don't see enough of it, unfortunately. But for me, I just think that the squad we currently have available to us, that sort of 4-2-3-1, just I think it just suits our squad. Like I feel like it's got to the point where I think it's so obvious that that's what the squad needs to do. I'm just like, but clearly, as we've all said, we also don't know enough the inside tactics that teams are going through and all the analytics these days. But like, I'm like, the squad just screams out that's the formation that we should be playing. If you've got Byrne in that too, with one of Matthews or Brown, I don't care which one it is, because both of them have been poor so far this season. So you could drop either of them and bring Byrne in, and it wouldn't bother me which one it is. It's with Byrne, but you just that's the way that I see it. And I would actually put then. I don't. You're saying about Josh Mullen, that would then mean I'm actually not bringing Josh Mullen into the team and keeping him on the bench, because I would then be playing McMullen as my right-sided sort of winger, whereas then you could bring on Josh Mullen if you want to change something up in the second half, because he puts in great deliveries. He'll always give you 100% effort as well, which is kind of what you need in a derby. But I think I would be going to a back four and to a 4-2-3-1 with Doherty, Fordyce, Hanlon, and I would be bringing Stevenson back in just purely for his experience. And I also was just baffled when he was dropped anyway, because he's not been injured. So that's why it was even more like, well, what's going on? But at the same time, for most of the games, I don't think Ewan Wilson's done anything that's glaringly obviously wrong. But at the same time, he's not really done anything that I've went, oh, great, this guy's an upgrade on Lewis Stevenson. Like, he's not. He's just been 6 out of 10, 5 out of 10. He's not really done anything. He's kind of, I think what somebody in the group chat said, he's been like the left-sided James Brown for us. And that, genuinely, because I can tell you right now, if he goes back to Motherwell, whether it's the end of the season or January, if he's really not played much football between then and now, nobody's really going to remember what he's done for the Rovers. So, I just think that Stevenson just brings you that experience, and he knows what the Fife derby means, but he's played in plenty of Edinburgh derbies himself as well. So he's got plenty of big game sort of knowledge to be able to bring to the lineup as well. So I think that's the way that I would line up the defence, and then I'm hoping Richard Chin is kind of fit, but we don't know, because, well, they flew him to Malaysia just for him to no play because he was injured. Like, so we'll need to see what sort of fitness he's got, but I think it could be a case of it's McMullen on one side, Dylan Easton on one side, and Hamilton up top. It's who you go with in that sort of 10. if Chin's fit, you probably put Easton inside and then put Chin on the left. But if he's not fit, do you gamble and go with somebody as young as Kai Montague in such a sort of big game on the TV on a Friday night? It could go one or two ways with Kai Montague in that situation. It could be he absolutely thrives on it and just, as I said earlier, young players that can be fearless and just don't care, and he has a belter. Or does he go into his shell, makes a few bad passes, loses the ball a lot, and then starts worrying about stuff, and then you have to make an early sub, or you just don't know. So, but that's the sort of way that I would go about it. But I know that Barry Robson is certainly not going to go that way.
That's all right. We're not worried about that, Scott. We're purely speculating. Greig, just come round to yourself. Do you think after sort of last week and the performances over the last few weeks, systemic change potential for the midfield there? Would that be something, if we're putting on our Monday night football hats and sort of looking, do you think that's something that you would be keen to see?
Yeah, I mean, I mentioned pre-match for the Ayr game that I would probably be taking Brown out the lineup, and none's been kind of evidence to change my mind on that one from the weekend. So, at risk of just it being cliche central tonight, I think there's an element of almost protecting Scott Brown a wee bit as well. He's coming under a lot of flack from the fans, and listen, isn't it all on him? I think you talked last week, Robbie, about in the post-match about the system being reductive for a lot of the players, and I think Brown is probably suffering as candidate number one in that scenario. He's been asked to play a role that doesn't quite suit him alongside a player that's very, very similar to him. Listen, Brown and Matthews, we talked at length, I don't think they bring the best of one another out, so I would drop Brown, and I think actually, truth be told, if he wasn't a captain, he'd have been dropped by now anyway. His performances, his form are just well off it. That said, I'm not really sure that there's, as much as when we've got a fully fit squad, we've got players that I'm not sure are there to enable any significant change. You know, we've got Ensuo, who we've not seen yet. We've no idea what he's like. You know, we've got Gentles, who has featured sparingly. But in terms of the midfield, okay, you drop Brown, bring Byrne in. I'd be going with the same back four that the guys have mentioned. And I think that gives you the platform. Byrne in there, Matthews in there. I'd written down initially McMullen on the right and Easton on the left with Hamilton up top. But it's who do you play in that kind of supporting role? And I think Montague was my first option. Been on from the start, maybe does work for him. If he's struggling though, you're really at a loss. I wholeheartedly think McMullen needs to play as a right winger. He was signed as a right winger. Playing him anywhere else as a false nine, playing him as a 10, it's not going to work. But the irony is, if you're not playing Montague in the middle, you really kind of have to bring McMullen more centrally and maybe put Mullen on the right wing. But for me, that midfield, I think it has to be a 2, not a 3. And it has to be Brown that sits this one out. I think Byrne has to start, and for me, it's Matthews that partners him.
Yeah, and one player that we've not mentioned so far, bit of a mystery over him. So Lewis Vaughan, injured for the last few games. So, I mean, Allan, if he's fit, would you bring him right back in, or do you think there's got to be a sort of degree of patience there? Lewis Vaughan has numerous derby moments, to say the least. You can rattle them off as long as you want, basically, but there's also that question of protecting the player.
Yeah, I mean, and what a fully fit and functioning Lewis Vaughan does is gives you another option at number 10. Yeah. So you can then play Easton left, Vaughan middle, McMullen right, and him and Hamilton have, you know, when they've played together a bit in the past, you know, I've built up a bit of a thing. I don't know that he's going to be fit enough, but I don't remember a player that's come in from nowhere to the starting 11 quite as much as Vaughan has in the past. You know, he's done it with mixed success. Obviously, he did it in the Airdrie game that cost Ian Murray his job. He's done it at least a couple of other times where he's gone from being completely out the squad to back into the starting 11. So it is an option. It won't be to surprise anyone. I've also gone with a 4-2-3-1 with the same Byrne and Matthews in those two. I've actually, the three is like the same as with Greig and Scott. The three is the hardest to pick.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if we might see McMullen tried out on the left, because I think Easton's a better option in the middle than McMullen is. You can try McMullen out on the left, and that lets you bring Josh Mullen in the right. If he was still here, it'd be the perfect game for Lewis Gibson to come in and play on the left, but he's not. Callum Smith's played out on the left in the past, but I don't think you do that with him at his level of fitness and kind of match sharpness at the moment. If he was fully fit, maybe you try him out on the left with Easton in the middle. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what he goes with. One thing is it's unlikely to be anything like anything we've all said, but you never know. Stranger things have happened.
We need to kill people's time, so it's all right.
Robbie, just one there. I was going to say, in terms of Lewis Vaughan, he's maybe not 100% fit, but there's going to be a significant portion of the support think, and not without reason, that an 80% Lewis Vaughan possibly still offers you more than a fully fit Hamilton or a fully fit McMullen playing in that central position. So it's a derby. Vaughan is always up for derbies. He's come up with the goods before. Yeah. It's that risk-reward decision that Robson's going to have to make, because that's not an easy decision to come to a conclusion on.
Yeah, absolutely.
These conversations would be a lot easier if we knew what Paul Ensio actually is. I know he's a midfielder. I genuinely have no clue what type of midfielder he is, whether he plays wide, centrally, defensive, attacking, is he box to box? I know nothing.
I think as a group we also need to have a collective research to make sure that we're pronouncing his name correct, because I think we've got about
especially the guy who says it in the stadium
pronunciations of his name, and so I'm going with Niso. I'm sure I saw I went off and looked at one of the Rangers TV videos to try and figure it out and check it. So that was what I'm sure that's what he said. I might be wrong about that, but yeah.
If he's on Twitter, I'll see him.
Much how we changed Jordan Doherty and Jordan Docherty interchangeably across the podcast, which is, again, just one of these things. But I'm sure that we had discussions before on this podcast, and this might have been Ian Murray's the season that we started where we ended second in the league. Did we talk about Josh Mullen playing centrally? I think it might have been Blair that was asking the question. Blair or Graham, one of the two.
I think Blair was all I remember is that Duncan was very much adamant that it's not a thing. I'm fairly sure Duncan was maybe he is not a central midfielder.
I think Blair was open to trying it, basically. And I mean, did he? I think he ended up doing it a few times, like getting brought on, or whether he was on the pitch, he was then getting moved inside for the last 20 minutes or something. It wasn't something
maybe
like
the Airdrie game that he scored in, maybe? The Airdrie game that I think when he scored that goal against Airdrie, he was in a more central position, really, wasn't he?
Not too sure. But
he played fairly central in the game that we played. I'm not even sure what you would call the formation we played, with Dylan Corr as the only defender in the 3-0 game. Mullen played centrally that day, or he was a lot more central than he was no out wide that night. So
a phrase I would never think to say, but I really miss James McPake as Dunfermline manager. It's very funny.
Here.
They came up full of enthusiasm, and then we just absolutely bodied them for about 5 out of the 6 games. And we got. Don't forget when
the game that they won 1-1.
Aye.
and then we still went through and they didn't.
Yeah. Anyway, that's
and they gave us that as well.
Ancient history now.
Yeah, very true.
In the past, you've got to move forward, unfortunately. So, yes. I'd sort of spoken beforehand about on the post-match podcast for the Air game. So, in terms of the lineup, I was sort of saying go to a back four. Darryl O'Connor's another one, still to play a minute football for us. So, I'm keen to see if he gets brought back into the fold. Sometimes with derby games, you can bring players in, and sure, we've done that before. Brought in signings, and was it not Dan O'Reilly that made his debut in a derby, I think. Might be making that up completely, but you just sometimes it can be these types of occasions that you bring someone into the fold, you introduce them in, and it sort of creates a sort of high bar for them. I think the main thing is just it's going to be a lot of it's going to be there's going to be a lot of focus on the performance, but we can't lose sight of if we do get the result, that's going to be hopefully a reset point and being able to move forward. And I know that's me going back to my happy clapper self, but I do want to be optimistic and find some semblance of enjoyment going into games. So yeah, we will see what will it be 6:45 on Friday that we'll find out this lineup, and we'll see how Rovers are going with it. Right, Greg, you've prepared for us a Should McStay or Should Dargo, so you're on the other boot today.
Yeah, it was a real fluke result on my debut, and I want to make that absolutely clear for the record. So, I've got 6 clues. Hopefully, nobody's kind of jumping through it on the first guess across the board. But we'll get going. So, clue number 1. According to Wikipedia, I made 469 senior appearances in my career, scoring 60 goals. So for clarity, that's 469 senior club appearances in my career, scoring 60 goals.
So I'm going to guess with that. Must be some form of midfielder. Can I see a centre-back getting that many goals?
It could be Rover strikers, remember?
That's very true. That's very true.
No idea if we've had him already, so I'm just going to go Colin Cameron.
It's also It's a lot of games as well. You would think it's somebody that didn't get injured much.
Graham Weir. Just with you saying forward, some.
Not a clue.
Attempt of an opening gambit, Scott.
Grant Anderson.
Okay. Right, clue number 2. I played for 7 clubs in my career, though I was announced as a new signing 9 times. So 7 clubs in my career, though announced as a new signing 9 times.
That's a great clue. That is a really, really good clue. Because it's the type of one where if someone knows it, the one that jumped out at me was Callum Elliott, but I think we've had him before.
Well, this is the thing. So I should point out just now that, assuming it's correct, I went by the comments from Der Duck Pond on YouTube as to who previous answers have been. So
that's Rover.
Is that who that is?
Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
So listen,
Sorry for doxing your text.
Whether that's up to speed or not, I don't know. But I tried to avoid one we'd had already. So,
right.
I mean that would suggest that 2 of their clubs they've gone back to. So they've played for 2 clubs.
That's a good.
That's why I sort of was looking as well. It's somebody that's gone back to probably 2 clubs.
I was looking too much into the 4D chess of like signed for one club and then reneged on the deal like Callum Elliott.
Or Paul McManus.
And East Kilbride haven't been around long enough that they signed for them and then came to us.
That's a very good point.
Yeah.
any changes of answer?
No, just because I can't think of anyone else. I don't. Yeah.
You want clue 3?
Go for clue 3 then.
So clue 3, and I believe this, I've got this right. I was a John McGlynn Mark 1 signing.
Oh, you'll love to hear it. You'll love to hear it.
Well, certainly not Colin Cameron.
I mean, Graham Weir does fit the bill in the sense he was a John McGlynn Mark 1 signing. But I'm trying
See,
to
this
think
is a lot more enjoyable when you're the one giving the clues rather than trying to guess it. I can tell you that much.
Hearts.
Just trying to think of players that we've no had in this.
I'll give you a clue,
game.
Scott. There's hunters.
But I mean, like
I
in
know
John
that.
McGlynn Mark 1.
even for John McGlynn Mark 1, there were literally hunters.
Any name that I've came up for just straight away with Mark 1 McGlynn, I'm like, no, we've had them. Like,
Yeah.
there's been a few that we've had for that either.
Gary Wales.
Okay.
Gary Wales was with us twice. I don't know what other clubs he would have played for twice, but he wasn't the most prolific of goal scorers.
Scott, any advance on Grant Anderson?
I'm pretty certain we've probably had him.
It's
But,
the right era, at least.
again, I'm no. Has he played for many clubs?
I think he was signed by John McGlynn, but didn't play for him. Allan.
Played under Grant
Who?
Murray. Grant Murray.
Grant Murray. He was.
I'll go. I'll change it, but I still don't think it's right. Alan Walker.
Okay.
You might be right though, because he's played for. Came to us on loan and then would fit with a Fife derby anyway.
I just didn't know how many clubs he'd played for. To be fair, I'm no.
I don't think it's right, but I'll go. And we may well have had him actually, but it doesn't matter. Gregory Caddy.
That was the first person that came to my mind before even thinking else when he said John McGlynn Mark 1.
Played twice. Who else would have?
Okay. Okay, what clue are we on? Clue number 4. According to Wikipedia, I played 22 games for Rovers, scoring twice.
There's none of what we've said. Although Gary Wales was the T score.
He scored more than 2, but Wikipedia, you know what Wikipedia is like, eh?
The full caveat there is according to Wikipedia.
Yeah.
Just try to think of Gary Wales' clubs, because he had Hearts, Killie, us. I don't think he's had that many clubs, because he went to Australia.
Some Australian mob that he buggered off to.
22 games with 2 goals.
I've got a feeling this has got. I might be again wrong.
That I was just genuinely just the way to say it.
But you didn't, eh?
No, I didn't. You're right. I did not.
I was about to say.
Even then, I think he scored more than 2 goals for us, because he scored against Dunfermline, he scored a lob against Accies, and he scored against Ayr. A truly sensational.
Again, he was announced as this.
So you never know.
He was announced as a signing twice for us, I suppose.
We'd have played fairly.
Allan, any advance on?
I'm trying to think of loan players that we even had back then. Because 22 games, to me, like, anytime I see somebody playing less than 25, 30 games, I don't know why, I just instantly go that they were a loan player.
It's such
you just kind of think one season.
Such a wide berth in terms of the players. So, like, with the clues so far, 469 games, 60 goals, 7 clubs.
We've not had, like, a position hint or anything like that either. So, like, it's
22 games for Rovers with 2 goals.
Well, we can rule out a goalie, that's about it.
And then it's a John McGlynn Mark 1, which is the real, cat among the pigeons.
The John McGlynn Mark 1's quite a long era.
I mean, it's not Allan Walker, I just didn't have another guess right now.
Okay, you want clue number 5?
I'm saying, go with it.
For 5.
Okay, I think it does get significantly easier from here on. So, clue number 5. Due to my career club connections, a current championship player is often mistaken as being a son of mine.
Gary Wales.
Gary Wales.
Wait, no.
No,
because I'm thinking of Bobby Wales.
He's at Swansea, son.
Swansea would be English Championship.
Oh, wait, is it Andy Todd?
That's a good shout, actually, Andy Todd. No, but that wouldn't be a mistake. I'm going with Gary Wales.
That wouldn't be a mistake, actually.
Well, it could be that people think Matty Todd's
Matty Todd, yeah.
Whereas,
clue number 6. I do have actual club career connections through my family, which will be discussed at length on BBC Scotland's coverage on Friday night's game.
Right, there you go. Well done.
Well done, Scott. Andy Todd.
Oft. He's... 'cause, 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 what a strange career in terms of just coming over to
Oh,
us
aye.
right at the end, and just, we had that. Don't know if you remember the start of that season, but we had we brought in Ryan Boris and Craig Winter as well, to obviously a little.
We had
effect,
did we not have
Templeton, Goodwillie,
Derek Carkery? Because I
Derek
remember the
Carkery.
wind blowing him over many a times in a game.
And the start of that season was so funny because you would see Marvin Andrews, Mark Campbell, and Andy Todd. Anytime we were playing a back three, and anytime we got a corner, you would just see those three limbering up to get into the box. But then anytime there was a counter attack, you were absolutely terrified because it was like no pace in getting back at all. But no, that was a brilliant Should McStay, Should Dargo. So
Yeah, it was a good one.
Thank
Thank
you,
you.
Greg. Well done to yourself, Scott, and very well guessed. But that'll see us off for this Derby preview. We will, of course, be back with the post-match. Hopefully, we're a bit more enthusiastic than the last couple of podcasts. So, Rovers, as we said before, just give us something to cheer about. If we can get a win, that would be ideal. And kick on.
Get into them, as they say.
As you say. And time will tell.
Get your tickets bought. There's not very many sold either. So
I'm sure that's going to
there.
change in the
Get
next
yourself
year.
along there and get behind the team, man.
You know what it's like when you, with Derby games in particular, you sort of wait until the few days before and people keep tabs on it. But if you've not been in the best performance before, it can reflect on it. But
even though
hopefully
they
we can
do
get
charge
numbers along.
£8 for an under 12, Robin gets.
Well, hopefully we can get along in good numbers and support Rovers and get another rare win at East End Park. Don't get many often there, but when they do, that 3-0 in the Scottish Cup, just need to ask any of the lads involved in that and we will tell you that it's particularly enjoyable. But yes, thank you as ever for listening and we will catch you for the post-match. Bye for now.